So how I got into music is maybe a little bit of an unusual story. I come from a musical family, and my dad was a music teacher for a long time, and my mother taught piano, and she taught me from a very early age. Her method of teaching me was very sort of music theory based, so I hated it. I just hated, I was like her worst student ever. And I'm sorry, Mom, if you're out there. You probably won't watch this, but if you do, I'm sorry, and I love you. But obviously later in life, that was really important to have that background. So I did a lot of piano playing. I also did a lot of singing. I was actually a Mall in the Night Visitors, which is an opera by Minotti when I was in middle school. And a little bit scarred from that experience, actually. When my middle school class showed up to one of my performances. Got ridiculed for that. But it would be very influential later in my life for sure. So did some singing, and then when it came time to sort of choose an instrument, I wanted to play trombone. My dad, he was a trombone player, and that was, what I wanted to do. But for whatever reason, my parents said, no, you're going to play percussion. And I was like, okay, fine. And not long after that, I started playing drum set a lot with bands. Back then in the 80s, it was a great time to be alive, and learning new instruments. All your friends played guitar or bass or whatever, so I joined a garage band, the whole thing. I definitely had a mullet, and there are pictures, but thankfully no digital pictures. That's important. And so we would do Battle of Bands at the high school on the weekends, and did a lot of drum set playing. That was sort of my entry level into actually the world of percussion. And then it was time to decide, what are you going to do in college? My academics they weren't terrible, but they weren't great. And the only thing that really helped my academics was my music classes, band. And I took a little music theory in high school. And so I thought, well, I better do this music thing. And realized very quickly that I didn't have any really meaningful skills in keyboard percussion. And so I sort of had to really, really crank on those just to get into college. And thankfully, Gordon Stout let me in at Ithaca. And he was, he was obviously a huge influence on me early on. And he really opened up a whole new world to me. And when I heard him play a bit, that first year at Ithaca College, it really changed my life, and I just became infatuated with marimba at that point. And the first 2 years, especially at Ithaca, just countless hours of practice, getting myself into the practice room, just, digging in and practicing on healthy hours, really. So yeah, that's sort of how it all started, and I just never wanted to stop playing. It was one of those things that, I just really gravitated to, and it seemed to really be a great outlet for me, and I just kept doing it. So what I was looking for in a Mallet line really was shaped by my early experiences as a singer, but also working with singers, actually. I've done a lot of work with singers in my career, which I never would have predicted. But it's been really influential on the kind of sounds that I want to make. So, when we think about playing marimba and just playing percussion, right? It's a unique thing in the way that we don't really touch our instruments, right? Almost everybody else, your instrument's inside you, or you're holding it or whatever, but we actually don't touch our instrument. So that makes the mallet thing really, really important, right? That's your touch point to the instrument. So I needed a stick that was really communicative, that could, in a way, be a living, breathing connection to the instrument. So that meant just a lot, considering all of the factors. What was the shaft type, right? What kind of wood are we looking at in here, and how communicative is it? Can I really know what's going on at the bar level through feeling the vibration of the wood? So we tried a lot of different woods. Of course, the core, what most musicians I know have this ability to make many sounds, right? They don't just make one articulation all the time. They don't just make a dark sound all the time, right? So I needed to have the ability for expression purposes and artistic purposes to, be able to make more than one kind of sound. So that meant an acrylic core that I could manipulate in a way to either darken or brighten the sound, right? So that's why the sticks that we've ended up with are multitonal. And then when we look at articulation, that's the other thing. If you ask any musician in any orchestra or band or whatever. If you ask them that they can only play one articulation all the time, they would look at you like you were crazy. They wouldn't even bother playing anything, right? So I needed a stick that could give me a varying amounts of articulation. So that's why we ended up with a softer yarn. Attack as a percussionist has always been our calling card, right? That's what we do. But standing behind the marimba, I'm less interested in that sort of calling card, We already have to strike the instrument, so it's going to make a percussive sound. But maybe I don't want a tick on every attack, right? Just like a trumpet doesn't always make a ta articulation. So I needed a yarn that was soft enough to give me a consistent legato attack, but one that was also, I could manipulate enough to get a more ta articulation if I wanted to. So, the yarn type, of course, is important with that, but also how tightly wound it is or loosely wound it is. So the sticks that we ended up designing, I think, are great at all of these things. The attack is pretty legato for the most part, because when I'm playing, pitched music, I don't want this ta at the beginning of every single note. So as I looked at the IP catalog, as diverse as the offerings are, I didn't see a lot of mallets that sort of fit that niche, that sort of area where, you could make a lot of different kinds of sounds with the mallets. So I'm really happy with what we ended up with in this way. There's the 5 different hardnesses are really versatile. So, you can cover a lot of different styles. They're really great. The harder ones, the 4s and the 5s, are really great in the upper couple octaves of the instrument. And that's another thing that I really wanted to get right with these is to offer a good set of sticks for that part of the instrument that maybe, was so important early on in our history and maybe lately has been, less important given all these lower beautiful notes, that we've got. So those 4s and 5s are also really great for like Japanese, repertoire that tends to live more up in that register. The softer mallets are great for Bach transcriptions. I've done some cello suite performances and recordings with those, and they work great because the attack is soft, drawing a lot of attention to sort of the middle part of the note, and of course just modern American repertoire too. So they're really, really versatile, and I love that about them. So I remember life before IP, and we used to wrap our own mallets because there was nothing really else out there. And what was out there wasn't really good enough for what I was looking for. So I learned how to wrap mallets, and I remember never being happy with what I came up with. And so I would go back and try it again and try it again. And by the way, I still have all my yarn and needles, and it's all sitting up my attic. Even back then I had this sort of, just constantly seeking just the right kind of sound. So this process, as we developed the mallets, was amazing to me, and how far we've come in this time, because I would give Chris all of these very specific ideas that seemed almost impossible to create. And visiting the factory, like an hour after we tried, I sort of gave all this information to him. There were the sticks, like right there, and we tried them. And then I would like tweak just a little bit of thing, and there would be a whole new set like a half an hour later. It's just unbelievable, like the turnaround time. And that was just the beginning. I can't even think about how many test runs we made on these. So I'm so appreciative to Chris and the entire team at IP for just being so open and willing to try crazy things for the sake of artistry, right? I mean, that's really what it's all about. As we have these tools, what could be more important than the right set of tools? So I really admire that IP spirit, if you will. This sort of insatiable, like, well, yeah, we're going to try this because it's important. Even as high end as these products are, right? Especially the high end products, like we want to make sure that this is like new, something new. Something that can be the most useful to the artist that's using it. Yeah, so choosing the right mallet for a piece is one of the big questions that we have. Really, for me, it boils down to having choices. As I look at the marimba, we've got 3 zones, right? The low, middle, and high zone of the instrument. So if we use all of the same hardnesses in the way, at least the way that I think, we have a mallet that's probably too hard here. It may sound great here, but maybe isn't hard enough up here. So what we've done with the line is to have the hardnesses correlate to that. So a mallet that sounds really great down in the bass, I'll just go one hardness up for the middle range, and then those two sound kind of the same, even though they're different mallets. And so on going up. So I might have a 1 down here and 3 2s. And if I use them right, then you won't even know that there's any hardness difference between the two configurations. So that's sort of the first thing, is looking at where a piece lives in the range and then choosing a set of 4 that all have the effect of sounding like the same hardness based on the zone that they're playing. After that, it's really about style, whether it's a new piece or a more traditional piece or a transcription. So really, for me, it's about the articulation that's required for each piece that I'm looking at, and then choosing the right mallet based on that. So it's really great. Let's see. So this relationship with IP is fantastic for me in so many ways, but probably most important is that I can trust them with my sound. Right? What's more important as an artist than trusting someone to reproduce the sticks that make you sound like you, And I'm so grateful to them for their support. And since we've had these sticks out, I've been so happy with just their commitment to excellence and consistency. And I'm really, really, really grateful for that.